You almost have to explain the whole thing for people who really aren't familiar with it. The holistic care, the care in the context of the family, team-oriented, medically directed. And that has not changed. What we set out to do in the beginning has not changed.
In 1978, I got a phone call from Vance Davis, who said that their group, which was forming a hospice, needed a lawyer. And I thought a minute, and I thought, well, Vance, that sounds fine. What's a hospice? Most people at this point in time in North Carolina and most of the United States didn't know what a hospice was.
Hospice was an idea originally, but then it was a movement. And by the time it got to us, it was an idea and a movement. And so we were trying to make sense out of that. And I think the biggest challenge was simply trying to move from an idea and a positive excitement about that idea, moving to concrete, operational, functioning organization. That was tough.
Nobody knew what they were doing, and it was a slow process. Eventually, we had the framework for a hospice. We had no people, no employees.
The Treasury in 1980, when we were granted the charter, the amount in the Treasury was $35. A year later, after we'd had the fundraising campaign, it was $24,000. Most of it, I think, had to do with community contributions.
Kitty Boone, my wife at that time, decided that she would leave the American Cancer Society and become the first executive director of Hospice of High Point, as it was known at that time.
Oh, they were just ridiculous challenges. I mean, we didn't know much of what to do. Kitty had been the executive director of the Cancer Society, so she knew what she was doing, but we were all sort of winging it.
Most of us were volunteers. We weren't trained in anything that we're about to do. Only the nurses that were connected and the physicians were trained.
When we started at the Holt McPherson Center, we had a nurse, a secretary, and an executive director. That's when I decided to go to work, because we didn't have one nurse. But as the nurses came along, we did grow, and we moved from the Holt McPherson building into a precious little house over by the medical center. We had one table and one telephone. I think at the time we maybe had 10 to 15 patients. It was a long time ago.
When I first walked into the little brick home on Boulevard Avenue, it was very warm and inviting. They were also very eager to share what hospice was all about, and of course very eager to have a new nurse come on board and help them as a volunteer.
As a volunteer, you meet a patient in a place where you don't remember when that woman was all together and attractive, and there's no pretense, and you're really a conduit. I found myself that patients would say things to me that they couldn't say to their families, but I could say to their families, and it was a very special experience, and I think that most volunteers realize that once they have put themselves in that position to be in someone else's life.
The two things that had the biggest impact, I think, were United Way and Medicare reimbursement. That changed in large measure how hospice is perceived in the community, and probably it's changed the way it is done day to day.
And that's when more people really began to understand a little bit more of what they could receive through hospice care.
We were really growing by then. And I think we had gotten the Medicare benefit, and we actually had a fax machine. We were getting more and more technology all the time. So we were growing.
And eventually the Boulevard house became too packed, too small, and they moved over on High Street to the great big yellow house, which seemed enormous and plenty of space. and everything was going fine there until they began to get short of space over there. And then a disaster came as far as hospice and my family personally. Kitty developed Alzheimer's. She ultimately had to resign. And then a miracle happened as far as this hospice organization is concerned. Leslie Kalinowski came along, and Leslie made this thing fly.
When I first started with hospice, it was so much about being in the home. When we first started taking care of patients in the nursing home, even at that time, I was someone who questioned, why do we need to be caring for patients in a nursing home? They already have a professional staff taking care of them. But I soon realized that we offered something different and something better when people were dying.
We moved from the house on High Street into a ghastly office building on Lindsay. That was grim for all of us. We decided we had to have our own building. We looked at pretty much everything in town that was for sale. The Martin Twin Theater was going up for sale, so lo and behold, we came to the Martin Twin Theaters, and it just was an amazing transformation from what it was to what we have today.
One thing I'm so proud of today is the hospice house that exists here with the patients that live here and really don't have the amenity at home or the family at home that they can get here. To me, that's unbelievable that we have that, and I foresee that one day that will grow.
I can't imagine, where we'll go from here because we've come so far, but I know that we'll keep on doing a better job as we go and as the challenges come to us with healthcare.
It's probably one of the most important things I've done in my life, and I'm very, very proud to have been a part of it.
Looking back, you just have to be amazed that it did finally happen.